Welcome to Spirit Journey Collective. I'm your host, Sarah Ty. Get ready for compelling conversations with guests of all walks of life who believe they have found their purpose. Together, we will uncover unique backstories, hearing the raw experiences that led them to the work they are doing today. Let's expand our minds together with the captivating stories and inspiration that awaits. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Spirit Journey Collective. I have a really wonderful guest today. Her name is Mande John, and she is an ADHD coach for professionals and entrepreneurs, which I can't wait to dive into because, as most of my listeners probably already know, I also have ADHD. So thank you so much for being here today, Mande.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So can you fill in with our listeners, what does it mean to be an ADHD coach? What do you offer? And yeah, what are you all about?
Yeah, so I do consultation calls, and I think the best way to explain it is just exactly the way I explain it on the consultation call, which is I always talk about it in two sides. Like I help people with their executive function skills. And for those of you that don't know about ADHD, it is a lack of executive function skills in some sort of area. And different individuals have more skills or less skills in certain areas. And those kind of skills are like your time management, your organization, your planning and your prioritization, task initiation, which is getting started on things, metacognition, which is like you're thinking about your thinking, goal sustainability, which is like once you get started on something, finishing it to the end. And that could be big goals or that could be the laundry. Like it's the gamut. And there are about 8 to 46 executive function skills, depending on who you talk to, but I work with about 14 or 15 of them. And what I do is I help people build up their executive function skills with tools, habits, routines, and structures, which I always tell people sounds like the worst thing in the world, but is exactly what those of us with ADHD need. We just need them in a very individualized way. And that's what I do is I work with people to basically like build their toolbox to help build up and scaffold is probably the best way to put their executive function skills. And then I talk about the other side, which is if you've come across ADHD coaches before, they're probably very heavy on this side and this side alone. The other side is the mind management side. And I'm certified through the life coach school, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit later. But in the life coach school, we learn tons of tools. But one of the main tools is mind management. And that is that your thoughts create your feelings, which make you take or not take certain actions, which get you the results that you're getting in your life. And you can think about this. I have 3 kids. And so I like to think about it with that. Your thought is always related to your result. And one of the best ways to put that with kids is like when they're saying, I can't, they absolutely can't, right? Because why? Because the actions that they are taking are like zero because they're feeling defeated or upset or, like there's a bunch of different feelings they could be feeling that are making them not take action or not get creative about a solution and so is whatever we're thinking is going to be the result that we're getting. And that is great news and terrible news because you once you start watching your brain and start paying attention to the things that you're thinking, it can be a scary place. But with my clients, I like to say like there are 3 stages of awareness with the mind management, which is like first, you're completely unaware. Like your thoughts are just happening to you. You're feeling terrible. You don't know why. You're feeling anxious. You don't know why. And then once I start teaching them to like look into their thoughts, then they start judging them. They're like, ooh, it's kind of a scary place in there. I don't think I like hanging out in my head. Or I have all these negative thoughts all the time. I don't like it. And then there is stage 3, which I love getting my clients to stage 3 because that's acceptance. And that is the fact that we're going to have positive and negative thoughts, and that's okay. But we don't have to like let the negative thoughts run the show. We can choose to think other things instead. And it's not positive thinking because I teach people to think things that their brain believes, which is a huge difference between like just positive thinking, which is kind of like putting lipstick on a pig. It's like just slapping on a happy thought, but it's like a post-it note that doesn't stick very well. It just like kind of falls off because your brain is like, I don't think so. So we teach them how to like get into thoughts that are beneficial and your brain believes. So that's a little bit of a long explanation. I hope that helps though.
No, I love that. And I really like how you take both sides on, because both of those, especially listeners who have ADHD, you will totally understand. I mean, I'm listening thinking, oh my gosh, both of those are huge. So when
Yeah.
you think about the executive functions, I first really love the fact that you cater to the individual, right? Because I think that's been my biggest struggle. If I look into an app or something, right, it's always like a one size fits all kind of a thing.
Yeah, it has to
And
be.
yeah, and for me, that doesn't work, especially because, like you said, structures and routines. It just makes me go, because I've done it over and over enough times and failed over and over enough times that like starting new routines scares me, because I have that fear of, can I even make it through? Can I do the follow through,
Yeah.
even if I really want it? It's that like it's so hard to keep up with routines. Although I have some routines in place that are so helpful. Like I used to always lose my keys. I would always forget where I put my
Ew.
keys. And so now I have a hook. When I walk in the door, it goes on the hook.
Mm.
And so there are certain routines and things that I do that are just lifesavers. So I know how helpful it can be, to your point. But I think that individualizing it is really important to help you be successful at figuring out which ones you struggle with and which ones you can get better at. So that's
Ah.
amazing. And then the thought process too, because I think that a lot of people don't realize how strong their thoughts are. I
Mm.
love the quote, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. And it's really
Exactly.
similar to what you just, the example that you
Yeah.
shared. It's our beliefs really, they take us where we're going to go. And so I think that understanding, and I see your point too, that there is a difference between only positive thoughts, which is impossible, right? Because I think
Mhm.
that there is that toxic positivity. That's such a backwards way to say it, but it is. It's basically where you don't acknowledge any bad. Everything is always good, but it's not. We're human, right? We're going to have
Well,
our days
yeah.
and our moments,
And
and it's okay to acknowledge it.
it's toxic because if you are making yourself wrong for having negative thoughts, then now you're creating negative feelings on top of the negative thoughts because you're, making yourself a bad person or a broken person in some sort of way because you're having these thoughts. Everyone has these thoughts. Your brain is wired to think negatively to protect you. And, we're not worried about the saber-toothed tiger attacking us anymore, but our brain is still wired for that. And it's also wired for, being careful that people don't think that you're a bad person, or like there's all kinds of things that it's wired for where it offers you all these negative thoughts. Like you might say something stupid, like be careful. You might say something stupid, or they're not going to like you. So what do you do when you think people aren't going to like you? You behave in different ways, right? It's just a protection. And once we realize it's a protection, we can kind of go, okay, I hear you. I like to, Rachel Hollis gave a great example of like I think she did the bus. I'm not sure. Maybe she did a car. I don't know. I like to say a bus because I feel like we have all kinds of feelings. We can have tons of feelings at once. And so I like the analogy of like a school bus. And basically all your feelings can get on the bus, the negative ones, the anxious ones, whatever feelings they are, the angry ones, they can all get on the bus, but they need to go take a seat because we are driving the bus and we are choosing the music station and we are deciding where we go. And the negative thoughts just have to sit there and come along.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I've heard that analogy with the car. So it's like in exactly what you said, where it's like one emotion is going into the car seat, so to speak, and you're sitting in the driver's seat. But I love the
Yeah.
school bus because you're right. Not just ADHD people, like everyone has multiple feelings at once. And some of them are more prevalent than the others. But yeah, we tend to have multiple experiences at the same time. And I think it's important to allow all of the emotions on the bus, to your point,
Yeah.
because they all have a purpose, but they don't have to run your life. I think that's the difference, is being able to acknowledge, oh, I hear you. I see that you're anxious right now and you're feeling all these feelings. Okay, I'm going to take care of it. You're okay. You're safe. Let's buckle you
Yeah.
up. And yeah, that's such a great analogy. And it makes me think a little bit of shadow work. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but
I
it's
have only heard of it. I'm not very familiar with it.
so shadow work is really where you start to look at all the parts of you that you abandoned. And we
Mm.
abandon lots of parts of us, especially as children, when we realize certain parts of us weren't accepted for
Hmm.
whatever reason. Like maybe you were too talkative and your parents snapped at you one day, stop, you're talking too much, you're too much. And then you start to dim your light and throw that talkative part of you in the shadow, for instance. Or
anything that you deemed as a child, oh, this isn't safe for me to express, that's now my shadow. And it could be an array of different things, but shadow work is where you start to bring those back into awareness and really start reminding yourself, like, all of you is whole. Like,
Yeah.
all of, like, you're a whole being as you are. You don't have to abandon these pieces of you. In fact, these pieces of you are in most need of your love, really,
Yeah.
and acceptance. So yeah, that's what shadow work is. It's where and it's a combination of some trauma work too, but it's really acknowledging the parts of you that we thought weren't good enough. And so I know a lot of us shame our anxiety, shame our anger, shame our frustration, shame our ADHD qualities that keep us from getting things done or whatever, right? We have a lot of shame. And that's, I think, where that shadow happens versus when you acknowledge, like, yeah, no, I see you. I understand where you're coming from. You're safe. Get on the bus. We'll go somewhere together.
Yeah. And one executive function skill that we didn't even mention that's kind of coming to mind now is emotional regulation. And speaking of shame, that if your emotional regulation is low, you can fly off the handle. You can throw things, you can yell, you can scream, and that's just kind of the anger related ones, but it also could be in like sadness, anxiety, like a lot of negative emotions. And you could just like go there, like 0 to 60 in like, 0.5 seconds. And if your emotional regulation is low, you really don't feel like you have any control over that whatsoever. And there can be a lot of shame behind that. I grew up in a household where like furniture got thrown out of the house. Like my dad was like, his emotional regulation was like very, very, very low. And I think he also had ADHD, which it's very genetic. But I grew up seeing that, and my anger was on like a very like short leash. And with my husband, he took the brunt of that. And there was a lot of shame behind like yelling at him or getting really, really angry. And that can like be part of that shame work too. But to that shadow work, it's funny because it makes me think of like little me. And I was an only child for a while. And so, you get all the attention, you're talkative, that kind of thing. And then I went into like a step family situation where there were twins and they were older than me. And then, I had a stepmother, and that's who I spent the majority of my time with. And there was a point that I just got silent because I realized I didn't realize it may have not been true, but I internalized that nobody cared what I had to say because people would talk over me. They all had something to say. I was the younger one, that kind of thing. And so I remember just getting silent for years, like basically from whenever I decided, I think I was like 7 to, when I left the house, I just basically like kept my mouth shut most of the time. And so that shadow work would probably be helpful for something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's a lot of our stories, especially like in the millennial age where the generation, because we were raised by Gen Xers who were raised by boomers, and boomers were raised that children were to see, not heard, right?
Mm.
Then Gen Xers kind of adopted that, but we're a little more progressive. But I think the millennials, we were caught between those two generations. So the boomers were influencing the Gen Xers, and we weren't really allowed that space. I mean, when you have that, when you're a single child, I do think you do get a little bit more leeway because there's no one else there. And I can
Yeah.
kind of attest to that because my daughter is a single child. And so she loves the attention and takes it with her everywhere she goes, you know. So I can see how that's part of
I'm
it.
the Gen Xer, so I could very well
Okay.
see how like my parents were like, shush. Like it was
Yeah.
it was
Oh,
the
so you were
generation of
really in that. Yeah.
yeah, it was a
Uh,
generation of like, if you're gonna cry, I'm gonna give you something to cry about. Like,
mm, you must have been like right on the cusp because you look very young.
oh, thank you.
It's a thing. And I think that with my daughter, that has been, so I have always learned to silence myself. And so when it came to emotional regulation, unless it was like my immediate family, no one ever saw that I struggled with that. But if you were in my immediate family, you might have seen a little bit of my temper, or and it didn't happen a lot. But if I got pushed, I would snap. But for the most part, I learned really young to, like, oh no, we can't have feelings. We can't have big feelings. We have to be
Mhm.
really muted. And then my daughter came along and she knows how to push all of my buttons. And she's also ADHD.
Yeah.
And she was ODD for a while, but she's thankfully outgrown that. But I know that often comes with ADHD, is the oppositional defiant disorder. So we
Mhm.
had that going on too. And that really taught me about emotional regulation that I was never really aware of on my end. So while I would lose my temper or snap at her, I didn't like how that made me feel. And I was like, wait, how is it that
Absolutely.
I'm fine with everybody else, but with her, I like lose my mind in 2.5 seconds? Like, how does that
Yeah.
happen? But it's because she, knew how to push all my buttons. And I wasn't even aware that I had, that I had all this dysregulation underneath the surface. She was the closest to me. And so that's helped me learn about that on my personal level, and teaching her, because she's now, even though she's only 8, she will have her moments where she'll lose her temper, but she's really good at coming back and saying, saying sorry, talking to me about what's going on, why she's feeling what she's feeling. And I think it's because while I would lose my temper, I started learning how to repair pretty early on, where I was like, oh my gosh, mommy, I'm so sorry. Mommy got a little bit too angry. I shouldn't have said that or yelled at you. Let's talk about it. You know?
That's the difference
Yeah.
with our generations is like me too. Like my emotional regulation was really improved. One, with the mind management, it slows everything down. Like when we're over here unaware, it just like happens and we feel like we have no control. It's like all of a sudden we start yelling and we don't know why we're yelling. Like I had a period where I would yell at my kids, and what I figured out was slowing it down, number one, but also the emotion underneath. I realized that the majority of the time that I would yell, it was because I was really scared. And
Mhm.
maybe I'm scared they're not going to turn out to the adults that they need to turn out to. Maybe I'm scared that I'm not doing it right as a parent. Maybe I'm scared that if they don't do their homework, they're not going to get the education that they need, or, whatever it is. I was mostly scared of something, and it would come out in yelling. And once I realized, oh, you're scared, yelling's not really the appropriate reaction for being scared. But I would do the same thing. I would go, when I did lose it, I would go back and be like, I'm sorry, that was not appropriate. I'm sorry I yelled at you. I'm not upset with you. That's on me. And we never, I don't know about you, like you're in a different generation, but I never got apologized to from what I remember. So that's something
Yeah.
I feel like pretty progressive.
Yeah, same here. It depended on the parent. One parent would be more willing to apologize than the other one. But for the most part, if I got in trouble and I got yelled at, it was very rare that I got apologies for the yelling and for their dysregulation. Like
Yeah.
I rarely saw that. And I think it's generational, like you said. So yeah, I think that just makes such a big difference in helping kids with, ADHD and anything else. Like learning how to emotional regulate is huge. But yeah, so I would love to hear, you've shared a little bit about your backstory a little bit, but how did you find this work specifically? Like going from into coaching and specifically coaching ADHD professionals, how did you find this work?
Yeah, I don't know where I first found it, but I was listening to the founder of the Life Coach School, who I'm certified through the Life Coach School as a coach, but I was listening to her podcast it's Brooke Castillo, for like 3 years, maybe more. And I would listen to the concepts and they were just so helpful. And, the more I would listen, the more she would pull in like other resources. One of my favorite things to say is the right people and the right resources come into your path at the right time. And that was just the case with this. And then she would point me to other resources. Like I really love Byron Katie's work. Are you familiar with Byron Katie? Oh, okay. So she goes through like a question asking thing about like your feelings. And I can't remember all the questions right now, but one of them is like, is it true? And it really helps you to question anything that you're thinking. And so basically, Brooke Castillo was like pulling together all these people and pointing me in different resources. And I finally joined her group coaching program, which was called Self Coaching Scholars. And when I would come to my self coaching scholars coaching sessions, I would basically bring them my ADHD problems. And because it's just pervasive in your life. And they were helping me, and I was like building up skills. And that's when I started realizing like, oh, coaching can absolutely help ADHD. And then we bought a gym, And we went through the process of training and things like that for the gym. And I remember I was in the gym and I was like, I think it's time for me to get certified as a coach, because everybody kept saying, if you think getting coached is good, get certified as a coach and it's even better. It's like the next level. And I was like, I want the next level. So I was at our gym, and I remember my husband was like across the way, and I was looking at my phone, and I just decided that day, like, I think I want to do certification. And I looked it up and I walked over to him. He was like at the squat rack, and I'm like, I think I want to do certification. And this was like a huge investment. And he's like, yeah, yeah, someday. And because I used to say that, I'm like, yeah, someday I want to do certification. It's a really big investment. So not right now, but like later. And I looked at him and I'm like, it starts in 2 weeks. And he's like, you really want to do this? And I'm like, absolutely. And it was worth every penny. Like in the difference that it made in my life, and the difference I've been able to make in other people's lives, in the knowledge that I've gained. It was just huge and like really worth it.
I love how supportive that he was too. That's, you don't hear that very often.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah.
didn't give him a whole lot of choice, but he's a good guy.
Yeah. Well, no, and I love that too, because you there probably would have been some steps that would have taken if there was a no. But I'm just saying,
Right.
like, I've heard so many people who become coaches or want to go down that route where I hate to say they have to ask for permission because no woman should, but it's that stigma and that kind of like, I don't know. I love hearing the other stories though, where it's not about that. It's like, okay, we're doing this, and
Yeah.
and having that support. Yeah, that's amazing. I think ADHD getting its own niche is like magical because that's not talked about enough. Or if it is, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, this might help with that, but it doesn't, like, you don't focus on it in those areas. So
Mm.
I don't know how many ADHD coaches are out there, but I think that it's amazing that you're doing the work that you're doing, and there should be more out there if there's not.
Yeah. And we talked about my first experience with tarot, like my first and only so far. I want to work with you too. But we go to Prescott every year, Prescott, Arizona, and we stay in a cabin with my husband's family. And I love going to downtown Prescott. It's so cute. It's so like the buildings are so old. I love architecture. And so I love like walking around to the little shops. And there was this one that we'd never been in before. And they have like crystals and like antiques and just like herbs and things like that for like tinctures, and they have a tarot reader in the back. And we were just curious about it. And so we signed up with her, and we did individuals. So my husband did an individual, I did an individual, we did couples. And then my son was with us, and he was actually interested, the 14-year-old. And everything was spot on. But that tarot reading made a huge difference in my business, because she was telling me there are other people that can do the work that's being done in your life. You don't have to deal with the people that are causing you irritation or causing you pain or causing you, whatever. And like everything she described, I looked at my husband and I'm like, it's time to get rid of this person. And it was somebody that was doing a job in my business. And I I very much value personal responsibility. And because that's one of my big values, when somebody else doesn't value personal responsibility, especially in like a business transaction, it drives me crazy. Like when your values, people go against your values, it just rubs you the wrong way. And this person, like everything that ever went wrong was my fault. And I'm like, this is a service. You're giving me a service. Like, just why don't you figure it out? Like, stop pulling me into it. It's like going to McDonald's and getting your food, and they're like, hamburger's cold. That's kind of your problem. That's kind of how it felt. And so what I did is I was like, I have no idea how I'm going to get rid of this person and how I'm going to replace them. But the thing that she said in the reading is there are other people that can do this job. And it was nice because I kind of took from that some faith that like there is somebody out there that can do this. And because I had that little bit of faith, I moved forward in finding people to replace this person. And what I ended up doing was replacing this person for a fraction, with two people that do way more work than this person did for a fraction of the cost. and none of the irritation. And so that's what came of my tarot reading. There was more to it. I took notes. She let us record it, but I took notes and I went back through and like looked up the meaning of all the cards and things like that. I need to go back to my notes, but that one was huge. That one piece alone, I keep going back to my husband and going, can you believe how easy this is now? Can you believe that this person's so amazing? And can you believe that they do this, this, and this, and they're so much more affordable. And actually, like, I recently this week added everything up and I'm like, I pay two people a third of what I paid that person to cause me problems. So that's what came from my first tarot reading. I don't even know how we got there. Thank you, ADHD.
It's time to take a short break from our wonderful speaker. Are you in the need of guidance around love, career, family, life, or purpose? Embark on a spiritual journey inward with an intuitive tarot reading. Depending on what you're needing and looking for, I offer private one-on-one sessions as well as personalized email readings. It doesn't matter what the question is. A reading with me provides connection with your higher self, offering curated personal messages, or what I like to refer to as spiritual roadmaps, guiding you to the future outcome you desire. Readings are insightful and affordable. If you'd like more information or to schedule a reading with me, please see the link below.
I love that. Yeah, tarot, it's so many people go into tarot thinking it's going to be like, oh, you're going to tell me something about my future or something I don't know. But yeah, no, it's actually something that you already know and you probably have been struggling with anyway. And it's just like, it hones in on where to put your focus, because especially for those of us with ADHD, our focus is like,
Yeah.
many different places at once. And so
Which
we
is
don't
beautiful
know
and
where.
terrible.
Yes, exactly. It is. It's our superpower and our weakness all at the same time. But so it like the thing I've heard about is people say it shines a light on where you need to put your focus and where maybe you were kind of aware of it, maybe not even fully aware of it, and it just like makes it right there, which I love. That's such a cool story. So with the work that you're doing, do you feel like you found your purpose?
Oh, absolutely. So when we were in coaching certification, they put us in this little group and then they say, go coach people for free. And after, of course, we've had some training, they say, go coach people for free. And it was actually somebody in the group that I was coaching. And I had gotten off the call with her after helping her with this situation. And getting off that call, I just felt joy. And I always said, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. Like, that's the way I put it, because that's how I felt. Like, I had all these interests, but like nothing really stuck. Nothing was like the thing. And I had always looked at people, because with ADHD, it's not that you're not focusing on things, it's that you're focusing on everything. And so I was always watching people. I was always watching how they reacted. I was always watching like what they said. I would go back and I'd replay what happened and it's like, why did they say that? And why do they do this? And what makes them tick? And so I was always like interested in the psychology of it, basically. And I would drive my husband crazy because I'm like, why do you think they said that? And do you think they said this because of that? And do you think they did this because of that? And so with coaching, it like pulls all that together where it's like, I get to watch the person in front of me and listen and hold space for them to have any feelings that they're feeling and any thoughts that they want to have. And I get to look at the big picture. And it's amazing because like a lot of us can have working memory problems but because I'm so interested, when I'm working with a client, I can remember something they said 6 months ago and pull that back into the situation and go, well, you recall this, and does that have anything to do with this? And I can like put all the pieces together for them and offer it to them. And it's always a matter of like, does that resonate with you or no? And if it doesn't and they want to push it back, then that's fine. And it rarely happens though, because I'm so good at like piecing it all together and offering it as, you know, perhaps a solution, perhaps just an observation. But yeah, that first coaching call, it was like I found my purpose. And I very much believe like your purpose is where you're helping. And I think that was my problem with finding my purpose, with that saying, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, which to me was about finding my purpose. That was the problem, was because I just didn't know how I could help best. I knew I had talents. I didn't know how those talents translated into helping people. And when I say helping people, like artists are helping people. They're helping people by, showing beautiful things and creating beautiful things. Like writers are helping people. Like it doesn't have to be like a direct, one-to-one helping or one to a group helping like I do, but definitely like that's when my kids talk about like what they want to do when they get older. I'm like, and how is that going to help people? Because I know that they will find their purpose and they will find value in what they're doing so much more if they're contributing to the world, basically.
Yeah, my definition of purpose is it's something that lights you up and it helps the world at the same time in some way. It gives back to the world. So that
Yeah.
totally aligns with my belief of purpose as well. And it sounds like you found the thing that it aligned with your superpower, with the thing you already enjoyed doing anyway, but it just you were putting it probably in the not the most appropriate areas, but it was just something you were good at. So you would take
Yeah.
note of, oh, why is this person doing this and why is this person doing that? And it wasn't something that it wasn't in a container that was, I don't want to say it was inappropriate, but in a way it was like you couldn't do anything with it because otherwise people would be like,
Yeah. Yeah.
why are you in my business? you know but when you get to be at the person who someone comes to you and says, hey, I need guidance and help, look at me and figure this out, then you're like, oh, wait, I can get paid to do what I already want to do and I'm good at. And then you get to see how it impacts them on the other end. So it's not even just you being able to, use your superpower. It's like now you get to watch them find theirs too.
Yeah. And I know you'd like to talk about synchronicity. And I had this experience where I had decided that I wanted to be an ADHD coach, or that I thought I was interested in being an ADHD coach, because basically a lot of coaches are coaching themselves. That's just the facts. If you are attracted to a coach, it's probably because that coach thinks like you, is like you. You guys are probably the same people in different skin suits, basically. And so I always tell coaches, especially when I coach them, I'm like, you are attracting you. So how do you want to do that? But I decided I wanted to be an ADHD coach because it was helping my ADHD so much. And I'm like, well, I've never experienced ADHD coaching. Let me do that. And so I Googled ADHD coaching, and it was one of the first options that came up. And it was like, as seen on TV, and like had all this like press and all this stuff. And I won't go into the company that it was, just because I don't want it to be kind of a gossip type thing, because it was a terrible experience that I had. But I did look on it. I looked into them on Facebook, and there was some favorable comments and things like that. And so I was like, okay. And I booked a call, and, assuming that I'm booking a call with a coach, like when people book a call with me, they meet me. And it was not a coach. It was a sales call from a salesperson. And it was interesting because we live fairly close to Mexico, and we were going to Mexico that day, and the reception's not good on the border. And we were like in the parking lot of Mexico, basically. And they called me early, which is weird. I'm like, we have an appointment. Why are you calling me ahead of time? And I texted them back, and I'm like, I don't have good reception right now. Can we talk later? And they continued to call me. And I'm like, okay, that's annoying and weird, but okay, no biggie. They called again, and I couldn't answer for whatever reason. And finally it came to the time of our appointment. And I got on the line with this salesperson. And in coaching certification, we are taught you do not put words in people's mouths. You do not tell them they're feeling things that they're not feeling. You do not do any of that kind of stuff. We're taught to hold space, which is you're allowed to feel how you feel. You're allowed to, say what you say. I'm going to repeat your words back to you. I'm not going to put words in your mouth. This person told me that I was a burden to my family. She told me like that I was, it's something with my kids. I can't remember what it was. That basically I was a burden to my kids. I was a burden to my husband. It was like all these horrible things. And then she put like words in my mouth. Like she said that I said things I never said. And I think because I had gone on this journey with coaching where I had a coach that's like, you need to learn to love yourself. And I went down that road of like learning about self-love, that I really had my back in this phone call. And I listened, and I got kind of angry on the call, and I got very silent, and I let her just talk. And this is a salesperson. So, take it with a grain of salt. And then she was like selling me on coaches. And she's like, well, what kind of coach do you prefer? And I'm like, and I had been working with all kinds of coaches, right? In the group coaching that I was in, you met with whatever coach came on. And I'm like, I can work with anyone. It's no problem, like anybody. But what she was trying to do was like pigeonhole me into purchasing a more expensive coach. Finally, like she was trying to narrow it down and I just was not helping her at all. And she's like, well, I mean, you could have this coach or this coach. And I'm like, well, what's the difference? And she's like, well, this one has more experience. And this one was like $200 more for this coach. It was just all very creepy. Finally, we went through the whole process. I told her at the end, I did not appreciate her putting words in my mouth. I did not appreciate her saying I was a burden to my family and all those kind of things. But that's that self-love journey where like I had my own back, and she's like, she got really flustered and she's like, well, I didn't mean to say that. That wasn't my intention. And I'm like, I'm sure that wasn't your intention, but that's what you did. And so this whole experience basically, and they ended up firing me from the program, by the way, because I was very honest with them. And I'm like, I want to be an ADHD coach. And she even said on the call, she's like, well, what keeps you from just stealing all of our stuff? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not the kind of world I want to be a part of. And I'm like, well, if you want me to sign papers or whatever, I can do that. Like I was actually moving forward with this thing. And they ended up calling me back and firing me from the program. And it was funny when she called and she's like, I just don't feel like we can work with you. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, do you have anything to say about that? And I'm like, no, I'm good. And I was like so relieved, honestly, that they fired me from the program. I like really shouldn't have gone forward with it anyway. But all that to be said, like that synchronicity, like had I not taken that call, and had I not had that terrible experience and went through that and realized like, oh my gosh, they're doing this to other people. And had that not happened, I wouldn't have like locked down the fact that I'm going to be an ADHD coach. So that was like really cool for that to happen, even though it was like kind of a bad experience at the moment. Like it was, once I got beyond the call, I was like, wow, these people are a joke. And and I can be like kind of the light to their dark, and this exists in the world, and they are manipulating people and in when they're in a vulnerable spot, and that's really sad. So that was a really like wonderful synchronicity that happened that like really locked me into like this is what I'm doing, and there is no doubt.
I really appreciate the fact that you shared the synchronicity as not even being the greatest experience, because I think most people think synchronicity and they automatically think that it has to be a good experience or else it's not a synchronicity, you
Yeah.
know, and that's not true. I mean, we learn and we grow and evolve from exactly what you just shared. And if you didn't experience that, you may not have had the push to go after it on your own. And in this case, you knew exactly what you were offering that others weren't too. You
Mhm.
kind of had that inside look of like, oh, that's not what I'm going to do.
Right.
And I know how that made me feel. And I can't even imagine being on that phone call. I mean, sales, I get it. It's a necessary thing. I was in sales for a bit. That's why I couldn't stand it. There's just something, about it. Like it's one thing to focus on the services, right? But it's another thing when you're trying to manipulate the person into saying, this is for you. It's for you. It is for you. And it's like, but hold on. Like, just tell me what you're offering first and make me decide. Like, let me hear me and what I'm looking for. Because I
Yeah.
think that's more important than just shoving down a service. You know what I mean? You have to see how it lands with the person. And if you don't take time to do that, you're not looking at the person, you're looking at the numbers.
Yeah.
And it just makes it super impersonal and terrifying that so many people have probably been caught up in that kind of a self-deprecating type of service. Like,
Yeah.
like let's make this person feel horrible about themselves so that way they'll want our service. Like, what?
I had a client actually had signed with that company before she started working with me. And she told me, she's like, they just told me to go for a walk. Like, oh my gosh. I'm sure that was just like some sort of starting point, but I'm like, that's absolutely ridiculous. And at no point did they ask me like what challenges I was having. And that's just so funny. So
So they didn't even ask you what challenges you were having, but they assumed you were a burden on your family and your
yeah,
kids.
yeah. Just because I have ADHD, right? Mm,
Wow. All
mm.
right. Well, that's amazing though, that you needed that experience and it sounds like
Yeah.
it served you really well. How long have you had your business now?
I lose track, but I think it's been 3 years. It could be 4 years, but I think
Okay.
it's been 3. I'd have to, like, look back. With my ADHD, one of the things that I really do, and especially now that I have a calendar, it's funny, like, even day to day, my husband's like, "Do you have any appointments today?" I'm like, "I don't know, they're on the calendar." Like, I know I don't have an appointment right now. But, like, it's the same with my business. Like, people will ask, "Well, how long have you been in business?" I'm like, I'm not sure." Like, I know it was like June or July of I'm not sure what year. And I also forget how old I am. So that time awareness can, like, really stretch out for sure.
I'm unfortunately it's the opposite. I'm like hyper focused on how old I am. And like it's like 5 to 6 months before my birthday, I start saying the new age before I'm even that age.
Oh,
I don't
that's
know why I
funny.
do that. It's like I don't want to be 35, but now I'm gonna be saying I'm 35 now, but like come next year when I'm almost 36, 4 months ahead, I'm gonna start saying I'm 36. And then I have to correct myself. Like if someone's checking my ID and they're like, how old are you? I might say 36, even though I'm actually 35. And like, wait, hold on. I gave you the wrong age, but I swear I'm over 21.
That's
I
funny.
don't know.
It's something that that is a thing with ADHD where when things aren't important to us, we just don't absorb that information. And my age has just never been important to me. Like once I turned 18, that's all I cared about. And after that, I was just like, I don't know, whatever. Sometimes there have been years that I've been disappointed where I think I'm a certain age and I'm not. And then my husband like corrects me and I'm like, oh crap. I feel like I lost a year.
So what is a common struggle that you see with your clients? So I'm sure that there's multitudes, but what's one that's more common and what's advice that you give for that particular struggle?
Yeah. So I kind of thought about this question ahead of time and I did make some notes, but off the top of my head, time management is one of the biggest things that we work on. A lot of times it is moving forward on tasks, and that could be like big things and me helping them break it down into manageable pieces, or it could be very small things where we need to create a habit in order to get that thing done every day. It could be things that stay on a list forever. And a lot of times just committing to somebody else, the fact that you're going to do it is super helpful. Another thing I do with all of my clients is have them assign a day and a time to things that they're going to get done. They always leave calls with me with action items, and it's only like 3 to 5 things, and it's smaller depending on what's going on in their life, and it's, bigger depending on the time that they have, if they have a little bit more time. And I have them assign days and times. And the reason I do that is because you are 80% more likely to get something done if you assign it a specific day and time. Even if you don't actually do it that day and time, because it's been assigned, it's going to be in the forefront of your mind more than something that has not been assigned. And I don't know where I read that, but I read it along the way somewhere. It might have been the 12-week year or something like that where I read that. But ever since then, I've worked with that with clients and it has been true. I don't have people coming back to me saying I didn't get that done. Now, if they do come back to me and say they didn't get something done, it is just a matter of, okay, let's figure out what's going on instead of like, some sort of I don't know, negative accountability. I don't even know what that would look like, but there's a reason they didn't get that done. You mentioned like starting routines and then kind of like falling off. That's where I always talk about like the two different sides, the executive function skills and the mind management, because all of these things will sound like a really great idea. And then you start doing them, and then you're going to hit an obstacle, or it's going to get hard, or you're going to feel uncomfortable. And then we drop off. And that's where the mind management piece comes in. And I come in and I go, okay, what's going on? Let's figure out what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what actions we're taking or not taking, what's getting in the way. I had a client that would collect a lot of trash in her bedroom. And she was talking about this problem of collecting a lot of trash in her bedroom. It was as simple as like placing a trash can in the bedroom. And I asked her, do you have a trash can in your bedroom? And she said, no. So sometimes it's like really simple environmental things that help people, but they can't see it because they're in it. And all she's doing is shaming herself because there's trash in her bedroom. And she's not thinking like, what's causing the problem of the trash in the bedroom. And so, yeah, that's part of what I help them with, is like seeing big picture things. Those are like the main things, but it is organization, prioritization, planning. It is all the executive function skills that we dip into.
That's really great advice. I definitely struggle with that time management thing, and I'll have something I want to do, but I love that. Put a day and a time to it, because it's so funny. If I have it on my calendar, it's like, okay, and it's there. It's like cemented in, and I don't question it. But I don't
Mhm.
ever put tasks on my calendar. You know what I mean? It's like, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do that. And then it becomes like a big laundry list of things I need to do. And then it feels overwhelming. And then it's like, well, which one do I how do I choose which one to do? And then I don't do it, or I do like
Yeah.
one maybe, and it's like half done, because at that point I'm so overwhelmed. I don't have the energy. I'm wondering what my simple thing is, because you're right. When you
Yeah.
something that seems so, like, a lot of the times procrastination is another one, is all I know I have something to do that I'm dreading doing, put it off, put it off, put it off.
Mhm.
Sometimes for months. And then I finally do it. It takes me 10 minutes.
Well, let me share a time management tool that might be helpful for what's going on with you. I've
Sure.
created what's called a now, not now list, and it works with our
Mm.
brain really well because a lot of times people can get list anxiety. Like if you put down everything you needed to do or everything you thought you needed to do, you'd get upset. You'd feel overwhelmed, you'd feel anxious, you'd feel like it's all too much. And so what I have people do is a now, not now list. Now, the now list are the things that basically need done today or tomorrow. And the not now list is everything else. All those tabs you're keeping open in your brain about that thing that you need to remember to do, or you should do, or you want to do, goes all into the not now list. And the not now list is reviewed like once a week or so to see if anything needs to move on to the now list. Once it gets on the now list, it's going to go on to your calendar on a specific day and time. I like digital. All of my clients end up moving to digital. Okay, I shouldn't say all. 90% of my clients end up moving to digital because it's on their phone. It's there with them all the time. A lot of them will hold on to their paper for a long time, and I let them, because whatever you're going to use is what's going to work for you. So I let them hold on to their paper if they want to, but a lot of them move digital. And what I love about digital is like things can go on repeat. Picking up that bedroom can go on repeat for 15 minutes every day. And part of it is probably, if you're anything like I was, it's learning to put the things back, because we don't put things back. It really takes a concentrated effort to put things back where they go. And so that's just a really quick tool. Working with your now, not now list, and then plugging things into the calendar. And if you're a paper person, plugging that into your paper planner, that's okay. But I do encourage people to go digital just for the ease of it. And
I'm going to give that a try. So I guess the final question is just, how can our listeners find you if they want to work with you?
okay. Well, I mean, if you Google my name, Mande, it's spelled different than anywhere else you see. Again, that's Mande, just the E, Mande John. If you Google my name, all my stuff will pop up. But I'm also Learn to Thrive with ADHD everywhere. I love my YouTube channel. So that gets a video every week. The podcast also gets the audio every week. So I'm very active with that. And I'm always like, I'm bringing on a lot of guests. Sarah was on my podcast, and that was so much fun. But I also have a ton of tools there for you. And then I am getting a little bit more active in the Facebook group. And we have a Learn to Thrive with ADHD Facebook group, and on Instagram. So I'm actually getting my social media game going a little bit. So that's fun too.
Awesome. I will make sure to put all of that in the show notes. And it just feels like our time was so like quick, but I loved talking with you. I loved all the tools you shared. And thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Sarah.
Thank you for joining me on another inspiring episode. Remember, your purpose is a unique and unfolding path. I hope these conversations have ignited a spark within you. Until next time, keep exploring, growing, and embracing the beautiful adventure of connecting with your purpose. Stay tuned for more meaningful conversations. If you enjoyed the episode today, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And thank you for joining me on this journey.